Good evening, everyone. I invite us all to stand and as we lift our voices and sing with the anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing.
Lift every voice and sing till the heavens ring. Bring the harmony of liberty. Let the rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it be sound loud as the sing a song full of the faith that the darkness has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. On the wilderness, building a tasting ground, felling the hills and home, ungone and high, yet with a standing beat, out of the weary feet, come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over the way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading a path through the blood of the slaughtered. Up from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the one gleam of the bright sun is cast. Whatever waves, Lord of the silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy power led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Bless us, peace, straight from the places of God will be many. Bless us, drunk with the wine of the word before shadows within my hand, may we forever stand, true to our heart, true to our native land.
We remain standing as we invoke the presence of the Lord. Creator God, Sustainer God, Saving God, we adore you, we magnify you, We give thanks and we give praise to you because you are a great God. A God who lovingly redeems your people. For we have fallen short, but through your grace and your mercy, you have redeemed us. And for that we give you praise. We give you the glory and thanksgiving. Redeeming God, we gather here this evening to reflect on your goodness and mercy, which kept our forebears despite the hardships and humiliation they were made to endure at the hands of their oppressors and colonizers. We thank you for their perseverance and their faith through pain and quiet resolve to ensure a brighter future for those who would come after them. This evening, we are indeed grateful for the presence of Dr. Carlyle G. Corbin, who has come to stimulate our minds as he speaks on the topic, self-determination, the final stage of emancipation. Help us, O God, to deeply ponder what this means for us, as yet being a colonial entity, how we should approach future decisions. And most of all, help us to consider how spiritual emancipation prepares us not only for living in this world, but for life in the world to come, where we will enjoy life in your presence for all eternity. So bless our speaker and all who will share in this evening's program. In Jesus' name we pray, believing that you are the God who is faithful and able to answer all our petitions. Amen.
You may be seated. Thank you very much, Reverend Hodge. Good evening. Welcome to Ebenezer. As the sun sets and the pews here at the Ebenezer Methodist Chapel in the historic Valley in Anguilla, as they fill up, if you're on your way, you still have a bit of time. We receive apologies this evening from the Honorable Premier, Mrs. Cora Hodge, who is traveling shortly and could not be with us this evening. She extends her best wishes. And we are pleased this evening to have with us the Honorable Representative, Island-wide Representative, Mr. Jason Bryan. And we are joined by the Honorable Evans McNeil Rogers, representative of the House of Assembly, and other members of the House of Assembly we would like to welcome here as well. I think I see Mr. Merrick Richardson, the Honorable Representative for the District Number 5 as well. Our presenter, our friend, Dr. Carlyle Corbin. Good evening. Reverend Wilmoth Hodge, circuit stewards and officers of the Methodist Church and the Ebenezer Methodist Chapel, pastors and members of other congregations, permanent secretaries and other government officers, and members of the Constitutional Reform Committee, as well as Ms. Claudelia Senhouse and other members of the Anguilla Youth Parliament, members of the Anguilla National Youth Council and their mentor, Mr. Neil Gums, Mrs. Stella Gums, Edwina Stella Gums, Elliot Gums, Ebenezer family, friends, colleagues, sisters, brothers, and children, those who are joining on social media via the Ebenezer Facebook page, our YouTube channel, Radio Anguilla, who has suspended its normal programming so that we can be carried live this evening. We appreciate the support, and other media. To our Malihana Poetry Committee members, Ms. Avan Kati, Ms. Annika Hughes, Ms. Carla Harris, Janzi Webster, and Rennie Henry. And we also want to recognize this evening the participants from the storytelling workshop who suspended their proceedings this evening, their sessions this evening, to be here. We are very happy to have you. And we want to welcome all those members of the press as well. Janisa, always a pleasure to have you, and we thank you for the work that you do. Now, this evening, we are celebrating a special milestone. It's 10 years since the launch of the Emancipation Lecture Series. Some of us has whiter hair, a little shorter. But it was right here on July 15th, 2016, that Professor Vereen Shepherd presented our very first lecture. And since then, this historic Ebenezer Chapel has become the home, the place where we have been challenged, the place where we have engaged, the place where we have reflected, we have learned and engaged in dialogue through presentations by local and regional scholars like Mr. Carlyle Rogers, Dr. Ronald Harrigan, Mr. Ken Banks, Professor Don Walichek, Mr. David Carty, and James Malik Fleming. And in this 10th year, we are pleased to welcome an Anguillian at heart, Dr. Carlyle Corbin, to present our 2026 lecture. The now annual Emancipation Lecture Series was inspired by the late Reverend Dr. Wycherley Gums, an activist, a scholar, and former superintendent of the Methodist Circuit here in Anguilla, and our own pastor here at Ebenezer. One of his most memorable refrains, and I keep saying this every year, lest we forget. He believed deeply that the observance of emancipation was not merely a tradition or something that we do, but it was a responsibility. He challenged us to remember the courage, the resilience, and the perseverance of our ancestors, and to ensure that each generation, Youth Parliament, each generation Youth Council, that you are aware of from whence we came, lest we forget. So we give thanks for the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Wycherley, and this evening we are pleased to continue recognizing his life and work through the Malihana Poetry Committee Reverend Dr. Wycherley Gums Awards, which will be presented later in this evening's program. Ebenezer stands as a monument to faith, resilience, hope, and community, and we continue to express our appreciation to the Superintendent Minister of the Methodist Church in Anguilla and to the pastor and members of the Ebenezer congregation for continuing to partner with us for the hosting of these annual lectures. Because it was here, as you know by now, on this very ground, that our forebears gathered about 192 years ago on August 1st, 1834, to celebrate the first Emancipation Day, the day that the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833 came into effect throughout the British Empire. So there could hardly be any other place that we would be celebrating or commemorating this emancipation in 2026. So welcome to Ebenezer, and welcome to our 2026 Emancipation Lecture, and welcome to our chairperson for this evening. It is my great pleasure to welcome back our esteemed chairperson. I'm smiling because this distinguished educator and scholar is one woman for whom I have the deepest respect and admiration. She's a career educator, a passionate advocate for independent and lifelong learning, and a firm believer in the transformative power of education. We are both pleased and honored that she so readily accepted our invitation to once again be part of this Emancipation commemoration, because as she so eloquently put it, It is essential, it is vital even, that as members of the African diaspora, we all seek to bend our minds in an unraveling of the past, as this can only lead to a better grasp of self in the present. She holds degrees, from the University of the West Indies, from La Université des Antilles Guyane, and the University of London. She currently serves as Education Officer, Human Resource Development within the Department of Education. And throughout her very distinguished career, she has also served as Principal, Deputy Principal Pastoral, and Head of the English Department at the Albina Lake Hodge Comprehensive School. As a classroom teacher, she specialized in English language, English literature, communication studies, and French, inspiring generations of students through her dedication, scholarship, and unwavering commitment to education. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, I could be talking about no other woman in Anguilla than the very lovely Mrs. Rita Celestine Carty, who will take over from here.
I guess I begin by saying thank you, Dr. Fleming Banks, for that introduction. And I bid everybody a good evening. Are you having a good evening? Okay, so I want to see that on your faces then. I endorse the protocol that has been established, and I, in my turn, welcome you all to this 2026 Emancipation Lecture as coordinated by the Malyahana Poetry Organizing Committee. I welcome too our esteemed featured speaker, Dr. Carlyle G. Corbin, who will soon have our full and rapt attention. At this time, I also draw our attention to the fact that we are here not only to attend the Emancipation Lecture, but also, as Dr. Fleming Banks said, to commemorate the 196th anniversary of this space in which we are seated, the Ebenezer Methodist Chapel. I trust that at the end of this evening of celebration and reflection, we will be able to say that we were well met in this special space. At this time, and as per our program, because it is going to be a busy evening, I will welcome the Ebenezer Men's Fellowship to render a selection. Please welcome them.
Good news, good news, good news, good news. Good news, good news, good news, good news.
I got a crown up in that kingdom,
In that good news. I got a crown up in that kingdom, in that good news. I'm gonna lay down this world and take the lump of my cross. I'm gonna take it home to my Jesus in that good news. In that good news. Good news, good news, good news. Good news, good news, good news. Good news, good news, good news. I gotta roll up in that kingdom, in that good news. I gotta roll up in that kingdom, in that good news. I'm gonna lay down this world on the shoulder up of my cross. Gonna take it home unto my Jesus in that good news. Good news, good news, good news, good news, good news. Good news, good news, good news. Good news, good news, good news. I got a Savior in that kingdom, in that good news. I got a Savior in that kingdom, in that good news. I'm gonna lay down this world, shoulder up on my cross. Gonna take it home to my Jesus in that good news. I'm gonna lay down this world, gonna shoulder up on my cross. Gonna take it home to my Jesus in that good news. Good news, hear 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 that good news. I got a harp in that kingdom, hear that good news. I got a harp in that kingdom, in that good news. I'm gonna lay down this world, gonna shoulder up on my cross, gonna take it home to my Jesus in that good news. Good news, hear 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 that good news. I got a song in that kingdom, hear that good news. I've got a song in that kingdom, in that good news. I'm gonna lay down this cross, gonna shoulder up on my cross, and take it home to my Jesus in that good news. I'm gonna lay down this cross, gonna shoulder up on my cross, gonna take it home to my Jesus in that good news.
The Anglican Methodist minister, author, and a poet, Reverend Dr. Gumbs' work, whether theological, academic, or artistic, was largely directed to issues related to personal and national emancipation, selfhood, authenticity, culture, and creativity. The creative nonfiction genre therefore provides an opportunity for a more sustained consideration of the historical, social, cultural, and economic issues that formed the core of his writings. This year's competition had an adult and a youth category. This year, however, we received only adult submissions. And now we proceed to our awards. Our first awardee is Miss Charlene I. Gumbs with Daboy Aponto. Miss Gumbs is known to us, has produced prolific works both in poetry and increasingly in nonfiction, and she is tonight's first awardee. Miss Charlene Gums. Our second awardee tonight is Miss Aaliyah Richardson, and she produced a piece called Is It Really Just Here? Anguilla's Struggle with Colonialism. Miss Aaliyah Richardson. In third place, our third place awardee, we have Miss Casilda Thomas Carty with The Moses of Anguilla, How Mr. James Ronald Webster Became the Father of the Nation. Our third place awardee is Miss Casilda Thomas Carty. Casilda Thomas Carty. In second place this evening, we have Miss Kareen Rogers. Freedom Still Calling, Amazing Grace. I'm not sure if Kareen is here this evening. Okay then, Janissa will collect it for her then. Miss Janissa Webster, who works alongside Miss Rogers, will collect the award on her behalf. Thank you, Janissa. And this evening, we are happy to announce the winner of the 2026 Reverend Dr. Wycherley Nonfiction Award, Miss Suzanne V. Hodge. Miss Hodge is a reader, a writer, a poet. We know her a lot about disaster management, and now she has created her own whirlwind with Freedom's Ghost, Suzanne V. Hodge. Oh, she wants you in the middle. Thank you.
Congratulations to all of the winners, and please give them another round of applause for their hard work. And I want to draw your attention to the name of one of the pieces, which fits right in with the theme of this afternoon's presentation. Can you guess which one it is? Somebody's saying it, Freedom Still Calling. So that is a very apt name, and I think that is the award that Janissa collected. We will continue now with a selection by Mr. Elliot Gums, son of Reverend Dr. Wycherley Gums. Please welcome him.
Good evening and greetings. I thought about what to play for this evening, something that would fit in line with this evening's theme, and we've come this far by faith definitely fits right along with the journey that we're on as a people. So I encourage you or invite you to sing along with me. It's a well-known Negro spiritual, so feel free to sing along.
Yes, I can tell that was well appreciated, and I'd like to hear clapping, so clap some more, please. And I also like that Elliot referenced this journey that we are on, so I want us to contemplate that for a little and to understand that history isn't something that's in the past. We are tomorrow's history as we sit here right now, and we have to do something to pass on when we pass the baton to the next generation on our continued journey. So thank you very much for your contemplating, and as we continue in that vein, we will now have Ruth Spingy to render their selection. I think I saw, yes, there they are. Okay, we say thanks again for those inspired and inspiring pieces. Everything is falling into place. We're here to sing freedom songs. And as I said earlier, to know that our time is but our time and we have to pass the baton. So at this time, I will call on a member of the Anguilla Youth Parliament. You have seen her earlier by another name, but I assure you that her real name is Miss Claudelia Senhouse, and she will now come and introduce our keynote speaker.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Continue with the protocol already established. It is my privilege and honor to introduce the keynote speaker for this evening. Dr. Carlyle G. Corbin is an internationally recognized authority on governance, self-determination, and decolonization. He serves as senior analyst with the Global Dependency Study Project Expert Group, a United Nations independent expert on decolonization and Executive Secretary Emeritus of the Council of Presidents of the United Nations General Assembly. Throughout his distinguished career, Dr. Corbin has advised governments, international organizations, and the United Nations on issues of self-governance, political development, and constitutional advancements. He previously served as Minister of State of External Affairs in the government of the United States, Virgin Islands, and was a member of the Territories Commission on Status and Federal Relations. He currently serves as advisor to the Assembly of French Polynesia and is the originator of the Self-Governance Indicator Assessment Mechanism, now used by many territories around the world to measure progress in self-governance. A prolific scholar, author, and educator, Dr. Corbin is a visiting lecturer in Dependency Governance Studies at the University of Guam and in Global Studies at the University of the Virgin Islands. He is co-author of the landmark 575-page self-determination study prepared for the Guam Commission on Decolonization, and his most recent book, Evolution of the French Colonialism, a political and constitutional analysis, was published in 2024. Dr. Corbin is no stranger to Anguilla. He served as constitutional advisor to the Anguilla Constitutional, was part of the Electoral Reform Committee on behalf of the United Nations Development Program, short UNDP, from 2002 to 2003, and delivered the keynote address at the opening ceremony of the Anguilla Country Conference in 2017. Today, Dr. Corbin will present on the topic, Self-Determination, the Final Stage of Emancipation, drawing on decades of international leadership and scholarship in the pursuit of political development, constitutional advancement, and the fulfillment of the right to self-determination. Please welcome Dr. G. Corbin.
Good night. Wow. It makes me feel like I've been around a long time. My professor once said that he's not old, but he's been young a long time. And I always listen to that because it makes, I think that's probably defines me as well. Excellencies, protocol having been established, and in addition to that, all my friends. And I have many friends in Anguilla, past and present. First of all, peace and blessings. Excellencies, dear friends, pay homage to the Most High.
I wish to thank the officials of the Mailahana Poetry Group for the kind invitation to offer some thoughts during this important 192nd commemoration of Emancipation Day. I thank the organizers for the excellent arrangements for my visit to Anguilla. Of course, I have been to Anguilla over the years, as has been said, on behalf of the United Nations as a constitutional advisor under my good friend, David Carty, who is here, I believe, somewhere. I recognize the white hair. Yeah. It was a little grayer before when I saw you last, but now, yeah, we're all getting there. Also, with respect to seeing my friends, and it has been far too long since I've been to this beautiful country. I take this opportunity to thank my dear friend, Chairperson Dr. Phyllis Fleming Banks, and honor her for her years of continuing service at multiple levels in raising the consciousness of our people across the region and around the world. I thank her for her work in tertiary education, civil society, the private sector, and so much more. I also honor those of my friends in Anguilla who have passed on. As Bob Marley wrote, good friends we had, good friends we lost along the way. Today, we join with others around the region and around the world in honoring the victory of our ancestors who waged the successful struggle to eradicate the crime against humanity known as chattel slavery, those who set the path for us to follow. I acknowledge that our commemoration is being held in this historic Ebenezer Methodist Church, which was dedicated in 1830 and which was constructed by many of those same ancestors. For these discussions to be held in this house of worship is meaningful beyond measure. It is reminiscent of the historic role that the church has played and continues to play in the struggle for emancipation and self-determination for well over a century. I recall the courageous activity of institutions such as the Caribbean Council of Churches and its widely read newspaper, Caribbean Contact, decades ago, which was in the forefront of providing information and advocacy on social justice and instrumental in the self-determination struggle in the Caribbean. The role of churches and faith communities in the process of self-determination and decolonization was a theme of a recent conference in Tahiti, French Polynesia, where I had the honor of delivering a keynote address. The conference reaffirmed the primary role for the church in the self-determination process. It was with this in mind that the theme, self-determination, the final stage of emancipation, was selected for our discussion this evening. Friends, much has been written on the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade and the institution of slavery. We know the story all too well. It is a tragic story of kidnapping and enslavement of African people. Perhaps no more a graphic portrayal was presented, rather surprisingly to me, in a Netflix docudrama when I was on the plane on my time arriving in St. Martin before coming across to Anguilla on the ferry. And let me paraphrase from that source, and I quote, "The slave trade involves taking enslaved persons from Africa and carrying them across the Caribbean and to the American colonies, and stocking up on goods from those regions in a triangular trade. Imagine human beings torn from their families and homes, brutally dragged halfway across the world, used as human currency. But slaves were more than currency. Once in exchange for commodities, they are put to work, growing more commodities. This was really backbreaking work, which led to tremendous loss of life and did not allow for enslaved people to do much more than work from sunup to sundown. People in humanely crowded conditions who had been at sea for months, chained together below deck, hundreds and hundreds of them, well beyond capacity. They couldn't even sit upright. They suffered from rampant disease, particularly dysentery, because of contaminated water. Many perished along the infamous transatlantic passage. 1 in 5 enslaved persons died on the travel through the Middle Passage. The slave trade is worth billions of pounds each year." I close quote. One would ask the question, as I do, how then can the European and North American governments, businesses, and institutions whose wealth was derived from centuries of forced labor and inhumane treatment of fellow human beings claim that they have no responsibility for reparatory justice? When will we be paid for all the work we did for free? No doubt the demands for reparatory justice will continue to grow stronger in the Caribbean, in Africa, and beyond. I'll speak a little bit on this shortly. But it is to be emphasized that our history did not begin with slavery. Our history bears the legacy of thriving African kingdoms long before the European invaders. As Muta Baruka reminded us, slavery interrupted African history. Thus, we stand on the shoulders of those survivors who withstood those horrors which led to the ultimate victory of freedom. It was a hard-fought victory and came at great sacrifice. The Ark of Return was erected at the United Nations headquarters in New York in 2015 as a permanent memorial honoring the victims of slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. So many perished in the struggle. So many perished in the struggle. Least we forget. We commemorate emancipation from slavery at different times across our region, depending on the perpetrator. Emancipation in the British colonies, 1834. The Danish colonies of St. Croix, my home, St. Thomas and St. John, 1848. The Swedish colony of St. Bart's, the same year. The French colonies, also 1848. The Dutch colonies, 1863. And the Spanish colonies, 1873. Of course, our brother Toussaint Louverture led the way in Haiti in 1804 with the defeat of Napoleon's forces. As we celebrate these victories, we should remain mindful that full emancipation did not come with the abolition of chattel slavery. What followed was a period of post-emancipation colonialism. This was a sequel to slavery. This was a slightly modified, modernized version of what had formerly prevailed. So although the 1833 Emancipation Act officially ended slavery, newly freed persons were forced to continue working for their former enslavers under a system of apprenticeship. Similar versions of this post-emancipation colonialism and the abuses experienced predominated throughout the Caribbean. Colville Petty's excellent handbook, History of Anguilla, recounted the period of a 4-year apprenticeship for domestic enslaved persons and 6 years for those who worked in the fields to prepare them for freedom, according to the perpetrators. As this post-emancipation period evolved and as hard-fought incremental rights were gained over time, a new struggle began to emerge across the region, the struggle for self-determination. It is amazing to think that this period of post-emancipation colonialism lasted for well over a century in various forms. Some territories ultimately exercised their inalienable right to self-determination between 1962 and 1983, during what we know as the decolonization acceleration period, when the majority of countries in Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific gained their independence. St. Kitts and Nevis in 1983 was in fact the last country in the Caribbean to achieve independence. This was 43 years ago. For those of us who did not choose independence, other forms were constructed. There were the autonomous forms. We knew them as the Netherlands Antilles of 6, Aruba, Curaçao, St. Martin, Bonaire, St. Eustatius, and Saba, 1954. Puerto Rico, the year prior to that, 1953. Most recently, French St. Martin and St. Bart's, which actually took place in 2007. But as it turned out, many of these forms lacked sufficient autonomy. They were semi-autonomous. Other territories entered into integration arrangements. We know them as Martinique, Guadeloupe, Guyane, or French Guiana, with their own set of challenges as overseas departments of France. Later forms of partial integration emerged. And I say partial integration, as in 2010, when the 5 islands of the Netherlands Antilles dismantled. This resulted in forms of partial integration: Bonaire, Saba and St. Eustatius, as well as forms of partial semi-autonomy, Curacao and St. Martin. And then there are the rest of us, who will follow the path of, we call it dependency modernization. Crown colony, dependent territory, overseas territory, unincorporated territory, as the U.S. Virgin Islands, Commonwealth, as Puerto Rico. You name it, there are many, many ways of characterizing ourselves. These have been our designations at different times up to now. We have remained in these arrangements, which were actually never meant to be permanent, but rather they were meant to be preparatory to full self-government. This is the requirement under the United Nations Charter. Patience that we do not remain forever in the preparatory stage. Some would suggest that we have been in a period of dormancy whilst we hear a consistent narrative that seeks to legitimize our present dependency arrangements. Thus, we are considered sufficiently self-governing. I'm not sure what that means. But an objective assessment of our arrangements suggests that it is insufficient. This is the second quarter of the 21st century. Administrative self-government is not political self-government. It may surprise many of us that the Caribbean has more dependent territories than any other region of the world in such a small geographic space. And I work in the Pacific, which is a vast area. There are many colonies and dependencies there as well, but we are concentrated in a very small space, which means that we have many connections and interpersonal connections. Coming to Anguilla through St. Martin, I used to go years ago from the Dutch side to the French side to Anguilla, which I thought was very interesting to do because you pass through 3 countries with 3 different currencies, and people were all related, but the currencies are not interchangeable. And the 4th currency is the one that most people use. It is an interesting phenomenon, but it's our history, it's our present day, it's our reality, so it doesn't seem different. It doesn't seem out of place, as we would say. But it might surprise us that, in many ways, we have 6 British dependent territories, 2 U.S. territories, 2 French collectivities, 3 French overseas departments, 3 Dutch partially integrated territories, and another 3 Dutch semi-autonomous countries. If you look at the map and zoom out or in, you can distinguish it. But I'm trying to find one of the young content creators, they call them, and to actually produce a map which shows the distinction in color-coded, and I'm working on it. My daughter is actually an animator. I'm trying to get her to do it, but she's too busy. We have been called the remnants of empire, and so we are. Now, for those of us in these remaining political dependencies, the process of self-determination has not yet been completed. So let us speak a bit about this term, self-determination, what it is, perhaps what it is not, and what it may or may not mean to us. Self-determination, first of all, is a right of a people under international law to choose their political status and to determine their own form of economic, cultural, and social development. The right is contained in the United Nations Charter, in its various human rights treaties, and among others, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, among others. The nations of the world which administer territories are legally obligated to advance the territories to the full measure of self-government. Some equate self-determination with independence. I hear that a lot. This is not necessarily the case. The exercise of the right to self-determination can result in several governance models, ranging from independence, yes, to full integration within an existing independent state. Thus, self-determination is the process which provides for the people to make an informed decision on a permanent status, providing for the full measure of self-government. and there are minimum standards for the full measure of self-government. A proper self-determination process leads to genuine decolonization and the full measure of self-government. This is explained in United Nations principles which provide minimum standards for the options of independence, free association, and integration. Thus, independence is clear, and it is a matter of preparation, a timetable, and commitments to post-independence support from the former colonial power and also from the international community, including the United Nations. Independence for small states can come with agreements on economic development, trade, defense, and more. These are normal features in the 21st century, for small states in particular. Today's independence is more like interdependence. Now, the option of integration must provide for the citizens to have full political, economic, and social rights and rights of representation in the country in which they are integrating. Our self-governance assessment of Bonaire, for example, in 2020, revealed that they have only partial rights that have been extended to them. This does not comply with the minimum standards for integration, which is the reason why the civil society organizations in Bonaire are seeking to be reinscribed on the United Nations list of non-self-governing territories. They have an uphill battle because it is a political decision of countries in the United Nations, and not recognizing that it's been 41 years since we've had any movement in our region. Free association is another option that we talk about. It is a legitimate political status as long as it is on the basis of full political equality and mutual consent. That is, one party cannot make unilateral decisions for the other, such as annulling legislation of the elected government, among other matters. The West Indies Associated States model of the 1960s was judged by the UN to be insufficiently autonomous. Our self-governance assessment of the autonomous country of Curaçao in 2012 revealed significant deficiencies in the political equality with the Dutch, which maintain unilateral authority in many areas of that relationship. The Dutch acknowledge this today as a democratic deficit, but not much is being done to alleviate that deficit so far. Free association has a particular connection to Anguilla, of course, with your experience with the West Indies Associated States. After the demise of that association, not much has been said about free association as an option for the remaining dependencies in the Caribbean. This changed in 2003 when the United Nations convened the Caribbean Regional Decolonization Seminar here in Anguilla. The first time and the only time in the history of the United Nations that a regional seminar was held in a dependency. And the government of Anguilla of the day was instrumental in ensuring that that took place. But interesting things happened at that time, 2003. At that seminar, free association was confirmed as a viable option by the administering powers who attended. Months later, however, the one administering power with the most territories in the Caribbean announced that it no longer offered free association because it contained unacceptable contingent liabilities. Now, on this point, it's important to emphasize that genuine free association carries no such liabilities. Free association is not another form of dependency status. There are examples of genuine free association arrangements throughout the world, including within the Commonwealth. I'm of the view that a genuine free association arrangement represents a viable alternative of small island dependencies like those of us in the Caribbean. Dear friends, as for ourselves, the status quo dependency governance arrangements, even in their modernized forms, fall short of minimum standards of full self-government. Again, these arrangements are meant to be preparatory and transitional to full self-government, not the embodiment of self-government. The UN Charter is clear on this. We must endeavor, however, not to remain forever in this preparatory phase, as the dependency status can represent a slippery slope into stagnation. Some have suggested that we have stagnated already. At a recent conference at the City University of New York, the question was raised as to whether the future of U.S. territories would be of decolonization or colonial reform. The same question has been asked about territories under the United Kingdom of France and Netherlands in our region, and others in Oceania, which are similarly situated. A number of actions have been taken to examine this question on a number of fronts. We have had self-governance assessments for the British Virgin Islands, Bermuda, Curacao, Bonaire in the Caribbean, and French Polynesia, Guam, and Norfolk Islands in the Pacific. In recent years, they were examining the depth of the nature of their dependency arrangement and to assess their level of preparation for self-government. The University College of the Cayman Islands has published several books and journals with scholarly articles examining issues of contemporary colonialism in the Caribbean. The UN Decolonization Committee has conducted visiting missions to individual territories and holds its annual 2-week session at its headquarters in New York. The most recent visiting mission was to the British Virgin Islands in 2024. I had the honor to be their independent expert on that mission. The United Kingdom government is to be commended for its cooperation in facilitating that mission. A major conclusion of the visiting mission to the Virgin Islands was the call for a public education program to heighten the awareness of the people of the options available to them in the exercise of their right to self-determination and to providing them with the full measure of self-government so they can make an informed decision on their political future. The issue of education on self-determination was very prominent at the annual Caribbean Studies Association panel held in Jamaica last month. At this conference, Dr. Yadira Boston of St. Martin presented her latest book entitled Educators' Perceptions of St. Martin's Readiness for Independence. It was a very fascinating book. It assesses the awareness of teachers on self-determination process. And this is critically important in my view, because this was an approach that determined the level of awareness of the teachers, who are the ones who have the primary role in informing our young people on these issues. And the representative, I say young lady because I'm a father of daughters, the young lady who introduced me, before she introduced me, she also had an award, and her paper was on this very same question, so I'm really hoping to read that. There are other activities as well. The annual United Nations Decolonization Seminars are important activities that provide the space for territorial representatives to exchange views with experts, United Nations members, other territorial representatives who are also in similar political and constitutional circumstances. And these seminars were created in 1990, and they've been annually held and have been for the most part, and they alternate between the Pacific and the Caribbean. And the information exchange between us and amongst us is very, very valuable, because many times we are undergoing things which have been solved somewhere else, but we don't know that they have been solved. And then vice versa, we have also created things that others could benefit from. So that cross-fertilization of ideas has made it very important. In an earlier period of my tenure in government, I had the opportunity to serve as the executive secretary of the group of Pacific Caribbean countries and territories that were looking at self-determination. And the involvement and the connections made at that time are very, very critical. I had the honor in the last seminar in Managua to have discussions with Mr. Stanley Reed, and also previous years with Mr. Kenneth Hodge. So we have that connection continuing, and the discussions are continuing. The sustained engagement of our territories in this UN process is highly useful in our gaining a greater awareness of how we fit in this rapidly changing world, where territories are increasingly seen more and more in the context of their geographic and geostrategic as well as geoeconomic value, to the exclusion of the promotion of self-determination. The most important value of territories increasingly is where we are, what resources might be in our waters and in our lands, and that is more important. And where we are in the context of a major issue. In the Pacific, for example, in my work in Guam, Guam is being used as a major staging point for military activities with respect to China. In other areas, in our own region, we recently saw Puerto Rico and U.S. Virgin Islands being used with respect to that operation that took place in Venezuela. So we have a different context in terms of those who have the power over us. We can't necessarily, we don't have an ability to influence those decisions. Now, most recent interesting development occurred a few weeks ago at the CARICOM Heads of Government 51st regular meeting held in St. Lucia. CARICOM has now endorsed the revised CARICOM 10-point plan for reparatory justice, which includes reference to decolonization for the very first time. And I read from that plan, I quote, "The process of decolonization of the still existing European and North American colonial territories is an important component of the reparations cause. Colonized territories are economically constrained by imposed constitutional arrangements," close quotes. The CARICOM recognition of organic link between decolonization and reparations lends further support to the importance of completing the self-determination process and consequent decolonization. There are other elements at a global level that are seeking to address the question of reparatory justice for colonialism. Recalling the period after emancipation, there were many wrongdoings that were undertaken against the people. And of course, as well as the exploitation of resources, the misuse of persons in labor, and many other things. In my own experience with my work in French Polynesia, there was 30 years of nuclear testing, okay? And that has caused tremendous hardship, economic, but health consequences mainly. And this is intergenerational. So the cancer rates there, you can imagine, are significantly higher than anywhere else. And of course, the issue of whether or not such tests were safe became a factor and continues to be a factor. But the will of the people and God's will made sure that this issue never died, and now there's a response. It's coming, but we must be vigilant as well. Diligent and vigilant, indeed. Dear friends, last December, I spoke to a group of educators in St. Martin. A number of questions were raised that might be of interest. One question was whether our territories will evolve or whether we will stagnate, devolve, and be airbrushed out of existence as part of a forgotten history of a once proud people. We concluded that there are ramifications to delay and indecision in addressing our incomplete process of self-determination, and that we should examine closely our current condition as we have and continue to experience it, and as we have permitted it to take shape. Some participants in the discussions in St. Martin expressed hope that we might take the road of evolution rather than the road of stagnation. As Morgan Freeman said in the epic film Shawshank Redemption, hope is a good thing, and a good thing never dies. Might I suggest that hope is an important commodity, but it is not a strategy. It contributes to a strategy. This is not about hope alone. For us to advance, it is strategic thinking that is required. This way we can plan our collective future rather than have the future planned for us without us. And I had occasion last evening to meet with the Constitutional Reform Committee. And this is what we are talking about in terms of strategic thinking. These are the kinds of systems, kinds of organizations and strategy sessions that are critical for our future. And hopefully you can take this model and export it to the rest of our region as well. In the U.S. Virgin Islands, we have a constitutional convention, our 6th constitutional convention, seeking to draft a constitution for the territory. But in the end, it's still a territory. So it will be a constitution with a territory as opposed to a constitution without a territory without a constitution. I think that's essentially what our approach of at least we're moving in the direction. Eventually, we will be able to address the question of our political status. We are often witnessed in all of our territories to a mindset that the dependency status only needs to be tweaked a bit, modernized perhaps, through changes in languages, like titles, and so on, but with no real change in the imbalance of political power. Many are convinced to accept the path of dependency reform and modernization as the safest, benevolent path. But how then do we respond to the challenge laid down by our elder, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, who reminded us that, and I quote, "It is far better to be free to govern or misgovern yourself than to be governed by anybody else," close quotes. But Dr. Nkrumah also observed that existing colonies may linger on with intended ramifications. Dear friends, by way of conclusion, I would suggest that the dilemma of many small island territories as our own, if indeed it is seen as a dilemma, is the result of waiting too long to emerge from the status quo, which can represent an increasingly slippery slope. It is important to emphasize that self-determination is a transformative process. Dependency modernization does not yield transformation. Rather, it is a way to legitimize political inequality, to normalize it, to make it more acceptable. The present state of our dependencies in the Caribbean, even in the most benevolent and sophisticated forms, do not constitute the full measure of self-government. But these arrangements have been in place for a long time. We may have grown accustomed to the inherent inequality. We should be unsurprised that inequality is a requirement of these arrangements. If they were not unequal, we would not be territories. In the final analysis, the process of self-determination leading to decolonization is our unfinished business, no one else. The process is incomplete. We have to complete it. There are alternative paths that can be taken. Each territory should determine their own path. The determination should be made through objective assessment if we are to advance through a genuine process of self-determination to reach its natural conclusion and to reach the final stage of our emancipation. As Bob Marley would say, until that day. I thank you once again for the opportunity to share some thoughts with you on this momentous occasion of emancipation. As it said, onward, forward. May God bless you all. May God bless the people of Anguilla. May God bless this sacred land. Thank you.
Some more appreciation, please. And I'm sure we have a lot to think about. And one of the things we have to think about is, are we stagnating or strategically thinking? Where are we now? We have questions now for Dr. Corbin. We'll give him a moment to refresh himself and you to collect your thoughts. And you can ask him any question or share any takeaway that you have from from this very important session that we have shared today. An important takeaway for me would be how this situation continues to evolve, and now what is being exploited is our strategic geographical placements rather than our enshrined rights. So that's where the debate is. Which is greater now? And of course, this is from different perspectives, because we know where we live and how important it is to us. Do we think about it as a strategic geographical placement, or do we prefer to prioritize our enshrined rights? Your thoughts, your sharing, your questions. And I have Mr. Gums, and there was a charge to teachers in the presentation, so I guess he's standing to defend himself.
Yes. One of the biggest arguments about emancipation in the Caribbean is that the highest economies of the Caribbean seem to be overseas territories. So there's this argument that the overseas territories are developing at a faster rate than independent countries. So what's your response to that, Doctor?
Well, I think there are many ways to determine that. If you would look at, for example, the question of whose economy are we speaking about, in terms of territories generally are also constrained from certain aspects of their development. So the type of development, for example, is something which territories have to actually address, but they don't have necessarily, and we, as a generally speaking, we do not have the actual controls and powers to proceed with the kind of economies that we would like. But if you look at just barely at the statistical information, you will find that is true. In fact, we did a study some years ago which examined CARICOM countries, GDP, and the countries of the various overseas territories in whatever dimension they are. And that was, in fact, the finding, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Gums. And we do know it as our lived reality, but it's a matter of figuring out how to think about it and what does it really mean in the long run and in this baton that we have to pass on in this continued journey. Mr. Foy?
Thank you. Good evening. First of all, let me thank you, Dr. Corbin, for the presentation. My background is economics, so I'm always concerned about economic self-determination. And the question that Neil raised speaks to that, right? But I don't want to talk so much about that now. What I want to raise is, are we making an assumption, or what is the assumption we are making about political awareness in relation to the question of self-determination? I think that is important, because if we're going to talk about what form of self-determination, then it be assuming that the community on a whole is at a certain level of political consciousness and awareness, so they can understand the difference between going the traditional independence route versus free association versus whatever other options there are. And then you have to think about the political, the cultural, the economic, and all of those social and all of those aspects, right? But I would say this, that the level of awareness isn't there. So one of the first steps we got to take is, how do you raise that awareness? People going about their daily lives, the first and most important thing for them is living, their standard of living, right? Some writers in economics talk about the materialist conception of history. That is what is dominating us. We start with the materialistic aspect. I'm going to run 2 jobs to get car and this kind of thing, and I ain't too concerned about the culture and the link to the past and the future and so on. So that is my concern, that even before we get into the roots of the options, we need to raise political awareness, so political education. So this kind of event, once a year, is not enough, right? We need to have, and not just this kind of event more often, but in the schools. I know that the people in history do their various things. What is the library doing in regard to that? The library can be an important instrument in this process of raising awareness, political, cultural, economic, who we are, etc., etc. And how, historically, what we did in '67, for example, is resonating today. Quick example. We're all talking about AI and the money Angola getting from having the country domain AI. But we couldn't get that if we didn't have '67. We would have been a different political arrangement where that AI would not have been a country code domain that Sincus Nevis Anguilla could necessarily claim, right? So the historians also in school need to look at how we link what happened in the past, even though when it happened, one couldn't predict that AI. But perhaps when you really make the right decisions, there's a way history reveals itself to you and you'll get benefits that you never even dreamed of. Whereas when you make the wrong decisions, you end up with problems, etc., etc. So even as we talk about the question of self-determination, we should be aware of the need to be very careful about the kinds of decisions we make in terms of the kind of country that we want to really have, as ultimately a country where we determine what we want, and we have the freedom and the rights and everything to do it. Sorry for talking so long, but it's the kind of thing that exercises my mind all the time.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. And you said a lot there. And I had some of those questions and concerns myself. How aware or how concerned are we as individuals and individual households? I think individuals and households are, as Mr. Foy said, concerned about their own issues, their own material levels, their ability to take cruises or not, rather than these questions that we are here thinking about tonight. So how do we get that change? And Emancipation Lecture, as important as it is, needs to amplify and multiply so that we could talk more and understand the options more. And before I get to Dr. Brooks, I wanted to say that it resonates in cyberspace as well, because as we know, Sir Hilary Beckles and his team went to the UK not too long ago, maybe about 2 weeks ago, and they promoted the fact that the CARICOM reparations plan had a new addition, which included decolonization, as Dr. Corbin said. And that was published, and I think that there were responses on social media. I didn't see them myself, but I heard about it with people asking them, so when did you ask us? This is our business, and you're making decisions for us. So which means that they're not really concerned about what Sir Hilary Beckles is concerned about. So those are things to think about as well. We who are here and other people in our spheres of influence, what are our thoughts about this? Because again, if you call it self-determination, it can't be somebody deciding for you. You have to be part of the conversation. Dr. Brooks.
Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. I think it was very informative and gives us a lot of material to think about. But I would like to talk about economics. Brother Foy spoke about his concern about economics. in the early 70s, Mr. Stokely Carmichael came to our college, and he gave us a lecture. And one of the things he said was that he who controls the means of production controls he who consumes the product. We have to think about that. He who controls the means of production controls he who consumes the product. As independent countries, if we talk about self-determination in the Caribbean, the same thing happened in Africa. The European countries who colonized us, they have the means of production, stripped us of what we have. What do we have? A human resource. And in regards to the Caribbean, all the Caribbean islands basically have the same thing. Beautiful beaches, now tourism. Jamaica had bauxite. But what do we have to exchange? We have nothing to exchange. So when we talk about independence, how do we define it? How do we define independence? America became independent from the British government, England. No taxation without representation. What is it that we have that will allow us to be independent as Caribbean countries? We have nothing. So it means, therefore, then that our strategic thinking and planning still limits us in that there is a ceiling of which we cannot go above because we do not have the means of production. We have 200, I understand, and correct me, we have 200 miles of seawater or something like that out there. And my understanding also is that the Japanese and other foreign countries come and fish in our lands. And we'll talk about it, that they probably have reaped a harvest millions and millions of dollars. So as a tiny island, Anguilla, and a dependent country of Britain, what is it that Britain is doing for us when we have those resources that can provide a better economic situation, a better standard of living? Nothing. We don't have the means to be able to control those waters. So my concern is it somewhat of a nice thing, a good thing to be strategic? You can go to school and we study and we come up with ideas, but independence, how do you define independence for Caribbean countries? We see what is going on in Africa. The colonists, even the independent so-called countries in Africa, still have to do what? Get a handout from their former colonists. Why? And that is because the colonists provides certain economic benefits for them. So therefore, they are tied, they are trapped. Your thoughts?
Yes. I think you make a very good point. As a speaker prior to you also, I did take them in succession. The speaker prior mentioned, Mr. Foy, I think? Yes. Mentioned a key point, the need for education, the need for awareness. And having an event such as this is monumental on an annual basis, but of course trying to replicate it regularly would require a great deal of strategy in order to do that. But we have something at the United Nations which is adopted every year, and that is called a political education program to heighten the awareness of people in their territories about their options available to them. There are also programs that relate to the second point regarding the education, right? Rather economics. And in order to determine the actual value of the country requires a very significant economic analysis. And we have top people that can do that. We can bring them together in order to assist in determining a study on what actually we do have. Because there's a lot that we don't know we have. And in fact, reference to the Japanese fishing, that's been going on for a long time. And, you know, we have to be able to identify that, and we don't have the resources, obviously, to police it necessarily, but there are other ways to do that, by confronting them, for example. If you wish to confront the Japanese regarding fishing rights, or they're fishing illegally perhaps in the waters, they may not wish to talk to us because we're not sovereign people. They will talk to the sovereign about that. We don't know what the discussion will be. Sometimes that happens. And so we also have things which our territory, our geography creates revenue for abroad, not for ourselves. I work with French Polynesia, which has 5 million square kilometers of Pacific Ocean. They are seeking to identify how much the French take from the overflights. Every time a plane flies through their airspace, there's a fee associated with that. Where does that go? It doesn't go to French Polynesia. It goes to France. Same thing with cargo ships. Same thing with ships going through their waters. The fees on that do not go to the people. It goes to France. So the Fanon talked about this, Wretched of the Earth. He talked about the territories being a market, but he also talked about the territories being a generator of revenue, and the people are not familiar with that. So these are the kinds of things that can be unveiled, and to give you a true picture of your economic value, and that also gives you leverage in terms of the negotiations that you may enter into about more autonomy or what have you. But there are many things that can be unveiled by an assessment, examination of this on the economic level particularly, as well as other areas. Other areas of revenue that being generated that are silent. We're not even aware of what they are or how much they are, things of that nature. These are things which can increase our awareness and enhance our awareness and give us more confidence in terms of how we may wish to proceed moving forward. I think that is basically my response.
Thank you for that. And as another speaker comes to the mic, I think we can paraphrase all that and say that strategic thinking can set us free. And also, I would like to add to that we should not think about economics only for ourselves, as might be the case in the present, but to think of future generations, because we stand on the backs of past generations who sacrificed to make sure that we have what we have. And I think that that selflessness might have gone away from us, and we don't think so much of future generations, like a country like Norway does. They're rich right now, but they don't act it, because they're thinking not only of now, but of their future generations. Mr. Hodge?
Good night. Thank you, Doctor, for your presentation. I think the chairperson mentioned strategic thinking or stagnation. In my opinion, I think, and this is specific to Anguilla, we are swimming in a sea of complacency, a place of comfort, or a zone of comfort, insofar as thinking about moving on. And in so doing, I think we are doing ourselves a disservice. Mr. Foy would have spoken about the economic side of it and how things are in other countries. Comparison has been made about ourselves and other independent territories and where we are. Where we are today, we may feel that we are in a good place. However, things change. And we have seen a lot of changes in recent times in terms of the economic standing of different countries. Today we have a number of islands or dependent countries whose economic standing has changed recently. Guyana, for example. So while we think that we are doing good today, tomorrow we might find ourselves in the other situation. And with our thinking, I think for future generations, if we do not prepare them, we may very well be doing them a disservice.
Me again.
Okay, Mr. Foy, yes.
I won't be so long this time. I just wanted to respond to a comment that Dr. Brooks, the speaker right after me, said about we have nothing. We got something. Apart from the physical and the intellectual resources like data AI, telephone numbers and system and all of that, we got brain power. We got brain power. The difference often that happens in the world is not just your physical resources, it's your brain power. So education is absolutely vital, not just political education, but first of all, having a vision of what a little place could do if it develops the brain power of its people. I do believe, actually, that we in Angola have done a number of things, maybe by accident, if we hadn't thought it through properly, right? That says to me that if we really develop our brain power, we could do a whole lot more. And I'm glad that you mentioned, Chair, about Norway. We really need to study Norway. Norway has the biggest sovereign wealth fund in the world, twice the second biggest, $2 trillion US. The Norway Sovereign Wealth Fund accounts for 1.5% of all global financial investments. The per capita value of the Norway Wealth Fund is $340,000 US per person. They don't really call it a sovereign wealth fund. You know what they call it? Pension fund. A pension fund. When they came up with the idea of this sovereign wealth fund, they named it a pension fund because the driver in their thinking was the safety and the security of the next generations.
Right.
Hey, Doc, nice to see you again. Thank you for recognizing me by my white hair. But before I make my contribution, I really want to congratulate you for being such an apostle on this issue of self-determination. When we think of great apostles, we think of St. Paul marching all over from Tarsus to Jerusalem, to Philippi, to Corinth, and on to Rome. You seem to be walking in his footsteps in terms of global advocacy on this issue, and I want to applaud you for your advocacy and for your diligence and for your commitment. So, to back up my good comrade Marcel on his point of awareness, which I think is crucial because I'm not an economist like him. The blunt
as I think we all know, the blunt answer to his concern is that we ain't ready when it comes to awareness. We are not ready. But here's the thing that burns me up in terms of that very issue. Anguilla could be far more ready than it is because of the uniqueness of our history with respect to self-determination. No other island in the Caribbean, and I dare say no other island in the world, did what we did in 1967. And the audacity of what we did is just incredible when you really think through the ramifications of what could have happened to those leaders in 1967 and the people who rooted for them if they had failed. That is an enormously powerful example to us. Less than 2 generations later, we're not talking about 1834, we're talking about 1967. And I've also always been concerned about Anguilla Day in the way we celebrate it. And I'll tell you, I had a radio broadcast on this very issue years and years and years ago. Of course, nobody took me on, but that's okay. That's, in that, we love Anguilla Day. We all do. And hundreds, if not thousands of people turn out on the park to listen to our premiers or our chief ministers at the time say what they have to say and celebrate them, and then we go on to watch a good boat race. All right? And we don't stop to realize that how we celebrate on the park is a colonial throwback with the police right down to the Boys Brigade. And you don't have to tell me, because when I was a little fella in St. Kitts in the Boys Brigade, I had to march past the administrator with his plume feathers and his sword, give him the eyes right. Okay? So it's a colonial throwback that we have mixed with one of the most radical revolutionary moves that any small society, 6,000 people at the time, 6,500, and pulled it off. So the seeds and the groundwork for raising awareness, which Marcel so correctly raised, is crucial, along with your very good point about the strategic thinking. What the other thing, and I would really like you to speak to this, is that of the 3 formal United Nations endorsed methodologies for self-determination, integration, free association, and independence, we know in Anguilla that integration ain't gonna happen with us. I think we're smart enough to realize we ain't doing that. We're now going down the St. Bart's road. But independence, as touched on by Mr. Gomes, has almost evolved in our culture as almost a pejorative position. Yeah, if you're going independent, and there's a mindset. There's a mindset in, I don't want to accuse the older generation, but it may be correct to say that, a mindset that you don't want to go there. But free association has never ever been explored in the possibilities of that mechanism, if I may put it that way. And in your lecture just now, you mentioned examples of free association that, quite frankly, I must admit, I was unaware of. What I would like you to respond to is, what more can you tell us about that? Because I think that if our leaders, if our political leaders were to push to make the strategic shift from saying we ain't going independence, we're going to free association, if we could define that more clearly to the people, perhaps the awareness of what it means to be an Anguillian and what it means to be a free people and what it means to have stood on the shoulders of our ancestors, you know, way back who built this church, right through to those ancestors in our lifetime who had made such a revolutionary and successful move in 1967. I think that free association is undervalued or perhaps misunderstood. And if you could speak with your apostolic experience on this issue, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We had this discussion 20 years ago. And right here in Angola, when it was presented as an option and the administering powers who were represented at the meetings, the British, the French mainly, said, yes, of course, we offer that. But then they turned around and said, no, we don't offer it. And therefore, limiting the options to, and of course, integration was also not on offer either. So the only thing was independence. But with a caveat that it be immediate. So not even with a timetable, you know, but obviously it was a trap, essentially. And either today's discourse is independence, or if you wish to remain the same, these are the parameters that you have to exist under. And that is essentially the position. Now, before I get into that, you call me an apostle. I'm wondering if I'm not Don Quixote. I don't know. But there are many options of free association, and not even in the context of what they're actually named, because names are unimportant in these things. My former boss, my favorite governor of the U.S. Virgin Islands, Alexander Anthony Farrelly, who you all know, I'm sure, used to say, it doesn't matter what you call it, what matters is the elements of it. And so you have models which we looked at, and we have been looking at for a while. My favorite model is now been tarnished a bit. Greenland has been tarnished for totally other reasons. Reasons having nothing to do with their arrangement, except to say that their arrangement with Denmark is very, very unique in that they have elements of integration and elements of association. They have their own totally self-governing internally. There actually is a listing of areas that they control and a listing of areas which are administered jointly, and mainly defense and foreign affairs to some degree, but they also have significant foreign affairs as well. They control their natural resources, even though we're all supposed to control our natural resources by virtue of the United Nations, but lack of awareness, then we don't force that issue. But certainly, my other model, and of course Greenland being because U.S. Virgin Islands was once the Danish West Indies, and the treaty that transferred the Danish West Indies to the United States for $25 million in gold in 1917 included a reference to Greenland in the treaty as one of the addendums to the treaty, which effectively said that the U.S. would agree that Denmark would maintain Greenland. And now a lot of that is unraveling in the basis of the interest in acquiring Greenland by any means necessary, perhaps. Now, my other favorite model is Cook Islands. And it's an important model for us in the region because that's within the Commonwealth, okay? And the model of Greenland, of course, includes shared citizenship, which is very interesting because the U.S. model does not have that, and I'll get to that shortly. The Cook Islands has also shared citizenship with New Zealand, and they have full internal self-government, with the exception of defense, and no independent state, if it's purely independent state in today's world, as a small island independent country, is control of their defense. Really, they may be control their internal security, but anything in relation to external threats will always be in reference to an agreement, a defense agreement signed, either regionally with the regional security system or even further afield. So independence, as I mentioned in the presentation, independence is interdependence. because in fact, in today's world, it just has to be that way. No one is isolated anymore. Whereas once we were very isolated. That was one of the dangerous perceptions about being a small island state, separated from the mother country, existing on your own. You know the story. But that is not the case anymore. So the control of it, and I'm not an advocate for anything, as I try to be as neutral as possible, because I teach class. I can't give you my real story. But I do like free association, like you. But the idea, of course, that studying these models is very, very useful to determining that. And one can devise a model specifically for any territory, and it's an upgrade. It's not considered to be a rejection. A lot of it is psychological. We're not rejecting anyone, we're just upgrading the relationship to a real, true partnership in that case. Because the partnership that we speak of today, these arrangements, we're partners, but one partner has more power than the other. No, that's not a partnership. That's something else. There's a phrase for it, but I won't use it. I'm in the church. So.
Mr. Richardson?
Ray Richardson.
Ray Richardson. Mr. Karis Ray Richardson. I think I got it right now.
Good night, everybody. I just had some questions regarding the topic. I like everything that everybody said, but I want to be very specific to Anguilla context. There was a previous vice president of Zambia who spoke about handling their independence and making sure that being careful because colonizers would come back in the form of investors. I want to be very specific to the tourism industry. The late Corbin Petty, he would have specified in his book, Bless Our Phobias.
He's very much alive.
Mr. Petty? Sorry. Mr. Petty, yes. In his book, Bless Our Phobias, he would have specified that during the 21st century, hotels and the expansion of them would have caused the erosion of Anguillan consciousness, basically in land ownership. And that he specified that land, good, and he was very, let's see if good, and he was very specific with our understanding that land is power, economic and political, and that the current projection that Anguilla took with tourism and having foreign investors own land freehold instead of it being leasehold would have been a problem going forward for Anguilla's future. I particularly believe that just how we talk about AI being a natural resource, before that, land was considered the #1 resource in Anguilla. And when I was interviewing for my dissertation, Mr. Fay taught me about commanding heights of the economy. And I think Anguilla needs to consider land as one of our commanding heights of our economy. I want to know what is your thoughts on the projection of not just Anguilla, but Caribbean governments when it comes to hotels in the Caribbean and how those governments should go forward. Because it's really, when we're talking about consciousness, the first contact with any foreign investor is the government. So it's really the ministers, past or present, who should have that also level of consciousness when they are going through laws, whether they are revising them or choose not to, whether willfully or not. And yeah, you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so laws that need to be revised or may have not been revised, whether willfully or not. And kind of like the projection of labor relations, beach access, as we see with Jamaica. What are your thoughts on how those governments should go forward? Because the industry, when we talk about decolonization, we can't talk about it without industry. We're talking about economy. The #1 economy or the #1 industry in Anguilla is tourism. how are we managing that, and how should we be managing that going forward?
Well, thank you for that. Our territories, generally in the Caribbean, with respect to a few, our economies are tourism related. And therein lies a particular question of issues related to who owns the tourism industry within our territories. Is it, in some instances, and in most cases, and certainly, foreign investment is necessary. The nature of the foreign investment, the kinds of arrangements, the contracts, the requirements for local employment and management, these kinds of things are all part of that process. So it becomes a real partnership. If it works well, it's a partnership. If it doesn't work so well, then there are ways to address it. But certainly for us, I recall years ago, I date myself now, Michael Manley was the Prime Minister of Jamaica. And I recall that there was a major hotel that folded in Jamaica. You know, hundreds of workers, employees, and so on. So the government took it over and ran it for a period until such time as they were able to find a foreign investor. Okay, so there's those kinds of things that government input to ensure that people are not displaced in a situation where that happens. That's happened to us in the U.S. Virgin Islands as well, where a hotel closed from one day to the next. And do we have controls in place to address that, to protect the workers? The unions are involved. It's a very complicated, as you well know, I'm sure, a very complicated process. Mr. Foy would be more capable of elaborating on it because of his economic acumen. For me, I see it more in the context that our economies generally we also include foreign investment in that mix, and in order for us to ensure that we're able to control the society. I get a sense that the tourism economy in Anguilla is largely Anguillian. Today I had an opportunity to ride around with one of my good friends, and I was shown different hotels, different restaurants, and I remember from my time coming to Anguilla before, every restaurant that I ate in was an Anguillian-owned restaurant. So if you compare Anguilla to other territories, you'll find almost an absence of local ownership. And so that's something that is really disturbing, in many ways. But at the same time, tourism is key, but also having only a singular industry is very difficult. There are times when one can focus also on other areas of the economy, fisheries, in some cases agriculture, and the linkage between agriculture and the tourism industry. So you make sure that the local industry, the local agriculture can input into the tourism industry, which means that is a much more valuable input, and you get much more out of it as opposed to the importation, which is probably necessary, but at the same time, it doesn't have to be totally dependent upon that. So, yeah. Sir.
Good evening, sir. How are you doing? We've collaborated in the past, and it's good to see you back again. You spoke just before this last presentation, last question, about models, and I think Mr. Foy, in his last question, talked about models. The revolutionary leader of Anguilla, the father of the nation, as we all know, the Honorable James Ronald Webster, actually put forward his vision for future Anguilla, which I have never heard anybody, politician or otherwise, pick up and promote or discuss anywhere. His model was a different form of integration. So we talk about integration. You talked about integration. You talked about other models. But his model, which he proposed, it's in writing, it is there in his books. He proposed that the small islands around Anguilla, which together singly would, singularly, whatever is the correct word, would not be able to go it on its own. And remember, when I'm talking this, he'd have written this maybe 20 years ago or so. But his model was Anguilla, St. Martin, French, St. Martin, Dutch, Sabre, Statia, St. Bart's together. I'm not sure if he brought the British Virgin Islands or the US Virgin Islands into it. He could check that. But that was his model, and yeah, I guess you can expand it to bring in the US and British Virgin Islands and the Spanish Virgins, which they now call them, which Anguilla, of course, tried to control at one point, the Spanish Virgins. So what do you think of that possibility? Of course, we have issues with the colonial powers. You know, an Angolan fisherman cannot go 5 miles. If you go 1 foot into there, they arrest them, right? Or they seize their boats, or they threaten to seize their boats and take their catch. So obviously, there are those higher powers which might mitigate or which might against this. But if we are to be the authors of our own destiny, if we are to walk towards self-determination, then perhaps that is one of the ways which, like I said, I have never seen anybody discuss it. I've never heard anybody debate what Mr. Webster said as his vision, and he is the primary leader who, as Mr. Foy said, brought us to this point. So, just want to put that for us.
Well, yes, thank you. That does reveal the idea of that, and the point you raised regarding the integration of the territories. Presently, we have a form known as confederation, right? Which means that each individual territory would not lose its individuality, but they would agree to a common authority in certain areas, and it would ease the questions of movement of people and so on. I have heard of this idea with respect to the islands in this area, part of the region. We tried something in the British Virgin Islands, US Virgin Islands years ago, under Governor Farrelly at the time, and also under Chief Minister H. Lavity Stout at that time. And the idea was a confederation between the two. Confederation of the Virgin Islands. The Greater Virgin Islands is what we called it. Of course, the British and the Americans were, not too pleased that we would actually have the audacity to discuss something like that. But as Governor Farley would say, do until I tell you otherwise. And that was his mandate to me as his minister. And we established a confederal arrangement, but we ran out of time. And the next government didn't take it up. But the idea is still there in principle. You can start with 2, and you can add 1, and we also had an interesting discussion about adding Anguilla during that period because of our closeness, geographic ties, family ties, historical ties, all of that. But, again, you're not losing the individuality, but you have pooling resources in certain areas, which is always beneficial, which would then regularize travel, transportation. I used to be able to come to Anguilla on Liat very quickly, or Air Anguilla, for example, but it's a little more difficult to get here now.
It's more difficult to travel in the region today than it was 20 years ago. So these are the kinds of things that are very interesting. You take a country like Indonesia, thousands of islands, but they were able to maintain and still maintain a very viable country by the kind of linkages that they have developed over time. So it's very doable in my view. I would think that you would have also some considerations regarding the administering countries because they may not wish to lose what they have. And part of it, once again, is the whole geostrategic, geoeconomic situation for them. But that should not necessarily dissuade us from having that discussion amongst ourselves. And invariably, the OECS was initially looking at something similar to that. It didn't evolve to that, but the idea was there. And in many ways, they do function in a block. One of the things that they do, which I think is very admirable, and this has been going on since when Dr. Vaughan Lewis was the Director General of OECS, and that is to purchase pharmaceutical products in a block. As a result, obviously the cost goes way down. If we could replicate that in other commodities and things of that nature and even begin to produce and exchange and look at our own integration, economic integration within our islands in terms of what someone produces that we could purchase or even exchange in a barter situation versus what we have to buy from coming out of Miami, these kinds of things. There have been discussions on this for a while, and the kind of information that came out of those discussions is what we need to be able to leave for our younger generation who come after, because these ideas are still ripe in my view.
Okay, we'll have one more contribution from the audience before we begin to wrap up for this evening.
I must thank our presenter for that excellent presentation. Those of us who've been around as youngsters with the 1967 revolution that we've heard people spoke about, a bloodless revolution, okay? And being a trade unionist, a member of the Anguillan National Council of Women, a group that formed here for women for over 44 years. Some of us are in church groups. We are the same faces we see everywhere. And I was enlightened when I saw these younger generations coming up and spoke the way they spoke. And I would encourage the organizers, to take something like this to the school, particularly the Albina Lake Arch Comprehensive School. I retired as a school education welfare officer. And when you go to an assembly, not for the whole school, but you say going to the sixth form, or they have PSC sessions and so. And you'll be surprised to see just how one or two youngsters got up and say something, because I know these youngsters in school. And I'm impressed, and I'm sure that if you all go out there and carry things like this, we have the human resources. One of the things, being a trade unionist, right? And as we are saying, union here now like it gone, sleep, some people have been saying this and saying that. But the union has already put things in place for future generations to carry on, right? You spoke about the pharmaceuticals coming in block and all these things. So everything that was said there tonight, I was a little girl then, but I'm now over 70. So I can relate to everything that has been said. You talk about Manley, Farrelly, and all these people. Being a trade unionist, I travel and I meet all these kind of people and whatnot, but here, we have a thing of trying to muzzle the ox. And I'm one of those who's always speak out, whether in church or wherever. Okay, I try to get out gossip. But I would really like to see things like this go on, even to our community college. We have people there, and I'm sure we'll have younger people so that people like me will not have to be speaking at certain things, but just be there as physical presence. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for that. And it really does tie in with how we should wrap up. And I just have a takeaway question or two. And the first one is, well, we know that the story is not static, it's dynamic, it continues to evolve. So I want us to consider, have we evolved from the mouse that roared to a comfortable anomaly? That's one of our takeaway questions. And I want to remind us that we were here for the Emancipation lecture, which commemorates also the 196th anniversary of the Ebenezer Methodist Chapel and the 192nd commemoration of Emancipation Day. I want, yes. I want to borrow a sentence from Dr. Corbin. He said, and this is important for us to take away as well, our history does not begin with slavery. That's important for us to know. And we should also consider that there was that horrible, inhumane time called slavery, and yet we sit here. That's important. So my last question is, what will we pass on to the next generation that they will express gratitude to us for? Things to think about. But to end this event, I will now call on Ms. Avon Carty from the Maliohana Poetry Committee, and she will be followed by Mr. Sanford Richardson, steward of Ebenezer Methodist Chapel, and they will both bring expressions of appreciation, and that will end this very important event. Have a good evening, all.
Good evening, everyone. My expression is simply to do a presentation, so don't be fooled by the fancy word. It is my distinct pleasure, and I humbly do this on behalf of the organizing committee of the Maliohana competition, to present to Dr. Corbin on such a beautiful and stimulating evening. I think we'll all leave here that much wiser and more thoughtful to present to him on our behalf this small token of our appreciation. And on behalf of the committee again, I want to thank our so very eloquent and competent chairlady for leading us this evening. Thank you, sister-in-law.
I have 4 minutes to 9 o'clock. Someone once said, a vote of thanks is not an opportunity to make a speech. So with that in mind, here goes. As we come to the end of another evening, and I dare say a wonderful evening of reflection, in commemoration of Emancipation, in this, the 196th anniversary year of the Ebenezer Chapel, the Maliohana Poetry Emancipation Lecture Organizing Committee includes persons like Avon Carty, Annika Hughes, Carla Harris, Jancy Webster, Renee Henry, and Dr. Phyllis Fleming Banks. And this Ebenezer congregation, we'd like to thank our wonderful, eloquent presenter, Dr. Carlyle Corbin, for your very dynamic, information-packed, and timely presentation. Since you are not stranger to Anguilla, we look forward to having you again. Even if you just come just to relax. Yeah, freely Free association, yeah? We want to thank Reverend Wilmot Hodge as well, pastor of our congregation, for the inspiring invocation as well, taking us before God's throne of grace. And our dear Mrs. Rita Celestine Carty, for so ably chairing the proceedings. Every time I hear Rita chair, she does it differently. Yeah. Well done. The Ebenezer family for continuing to support this annual lecture series. And of course, Mrs. Stella Gums and Elliot Gums, representatives of our dear Dr. Richard Lee Gums. I think he would have been very pleased if he were here physically tonight. I recall, vote of thanks, you don't give speeches. I recall at one of our church synod conferences, Reverend Gums preached a sermon entitled God's Mathematics. God's Mathematics. And one of the things he was pointing out is that if he were here at Ebenezer, walls are made of stone, every one of these stones has a story to tell. And they may not be all very nice stories, but it's a story to tell anyhow. And just like all of us who have been here tonight, and we have listened, we too have a story to tell. And we be minded all night that we have a part to play in ensuring that we leave Anguilla better for the next generation to come. Sorry about that, I just had to do it. Ruth Bingi, Ebenezer Men's Fellowship, and Claudel Rumley for the continuing contribution through music. We want to thank you very much. Then, of course, yeah, there are those persons who can't come or choose not to come here physically. So we want to thank the media, the Anguillan newspaper, including Mrs. Janissa Fleming, Red Anguilla. I said something wrong? Red Anguilla, who carried the proceedings live, Lloyd's Live, Class FM, Cool FM, Upbeat Radio, Calypso Charters, and Caribbean Sundries. We want to thank the media for projecting the message tonight. The Ebenezer technical team did an excellent job. All of them are working overtime tonight. We give God thanks for you. Our colleagues at the Anguilla Library Service, the Department of Youth and Culture, and the Department of Education say thank you as well. I must say, though, that we need to single out those persons who really got up and asked questions or made comments. It makes a difference to the presenter when speeches given, lectures given, and persons are able to comment and to ask questions to enhance the exercise. Most importantly, we especially thank you, the audience, those who have joined us here at the Historic Ebenezer, and those who joined us online for sharing in this experience. Another important partner in all this is the Social Security, represented by whom? All of us, oh? Yeah. We want to thank the members of Social Security for their input in the exercise as well. So another lecture has ended, but our work of awareness continues. God bless you. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Can I invite you to stand for the benediction? Now unto him that is able to keep you from falling and to present you faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy. To the only wise God, our Savior, be glory and majesty, dominion and power, both now and forevermore. Amen.